Welcome to Nutrition 3. We will be discussing proteins and amino acids. Proteins. Chemical composition, just like in the carbohydrates and the fats, we have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which make up the main components of protein. Protein is about 16% nitrogen. Contains some sulfur, and if amino acids are phosphorylated, we'll get some phosphorus there as well. Protein is a nutrient in highest concentration in muscle tissue of animals. Meat has a high protein content, obviously. Proteins are all made of sequences of amino acids. Proteins are sequences of amino acids. The specific sequence will determine the properties of the proteins. And these sequences are dictated by the DNA, which we find in each of our cells. Proteins are made within the cells. So you start out with the DNA, you get messenger RNA, transcript RNA, and finally we get down to where we're producing the proteins. The specific sequence of those amino acids are going to determine whether the proteins are muscle proteins or they may be protein hormones, etc. But again, it goes back totally to the DNA in our cells. Proteins can be very small to very large, and it's going to be determined by how many amino acids we have sequenced together. Short-chain proteins are known as peptides. As we said, protein contains nitrogen, which distinguishes protein and amino acids from other nutrients such as carbohydrates and minerals, etc. On average, protein is 16% nitrogen. So if we know the nitrogen content, we can multiply it by 6.25, and that will give us the crude protein. Now we call it crude protein because in addition to amino acids, we might have some just free nitrogen within our feedstuffs. Could be some urea, and urea is not a protein made up of amino acids. So a lot of times we'll hear the term true protein. True protein is the amino acid content of a feedstuff. True protein is usually a little lower value than the crude protein value. We should also say that in addition to proteins containing nitrogen, the B vitamins also contain nitrogen. But the B vitamins are going to be in a minute quantity compared to the protein in a feedstuffs. Functions of protein are varied. Protein does provide a lot of functions. Start off with collagen, mostly found in fibrous tissues such as tendons, ligaments, and skin. Abundant in the cornea, cartilage, bone, blood vessels, the gut, and in the disc between our vertebrae as well. Elastin is a protein in connective tissue that is elastic and allows many tissues in the body to resume their shape after stretching and contracting. Blood proteins are varied, but the main one, of course, is hemoglobin, which is necessary for transport of oxygen throughout the body. it is protein plus heme, and here's the chemical formula for that. Keratin proteins, including the proteins in our skin, hair, feathers, and the animal's hooves. And then, of course, especially for food-producing animals, we're very interested in the contractile proteins, basically the muscle. And here we have a friendly little rodent building up its muscles. Proteins are necessary for the metabolism that occurs in our body. So there are protein enzymes necessary for digestion, synthesis of products within our body, and degrading different nutrients. There are extremely important protein hormones. Oxytocin causes smooth muscle to contract, causes milk letdown, causes the uterus contract at parturition. Growth hormones, of course, specific for different species, but necessary for growth and also influences lactation. Insulin to control our blood sugar. We have the whole immune system really needs proteins, and we've got 3 immune antibodies here that are going to attack pathogens, IgA, IgG, and IgM. And for our chromosomes, chromosomes, of course, are made up of the DNA, but there's a protein backbone to hold that chromosome together. Protein can be used for energy if there's a surplus of protein in the diet. So if protein is consumed in excess of an animal's daily requirement, it is broken down by proteases, enzymes, into amino acids. The amino acids then can be deaminated, and the carbon skeletons are used as a source of energy. So here's a little diagram of that. We start out with amino acid, take off the couple of hydrogens, take off ammonia. What we end up with is a short carbon chain that can be utilized for energy. Digestion and metabolism of protein. So proteins need to be broken down into amino acids in order to be absorbed through the small intestine and get into the bloodstream, where they can go to the cells to produce new proteins. Protein quality is more important for non-ruminants than ruminants, because ruminants make microbial protein, which they can utilize. And protein quality just refers to the balance of essential amino acids. Rumen microbes can actually make amino acids from nitrogen. So if we have nitrogen in the form of ammonia in the rumen, the microbes can take that nitrogen, and they need energy, dietary energy, and they can make a microbial protein for those ruminants. Well, what happens to those amino acids after it gets into the bloodstream? We can have tissue protein synthesis, and again, the sequence of amino acids is controlled by the DNA within each of our cells. You have synthesis of enzymes, hormones, metabolites. You can have deamination and use of the carbon skeleton for energy. We talk about essential amino acids, and that's when we're balancing a ration for an animal. We need essential amino acids, at least a minimum amount of each for the animal to be healthy. As far as amino acids go, generally about 50% of them are essential, need to be in diet. The other 50% are non-essential. Now, what do we mean by that? Non-essential amino acids. They're not there are amino acids that are essential in the animal's body, but they do not necessarily have to be in the ration. In that the animal can synthesize these amino acids from other essential amino acids, like I said, do not necessarily have to be in the ration. This is just a diagram to show how these amino acids are kind of linked together, and the physical 3D of the protein really determines its function. Monogastrics require essential amino acids. So generally we say for cattle, sheep, goats, there are no essential amino acids. Again, because the microbes can produce microbial protein, which is an excellent balance of amino acids. But even with ruminants, high-producing dairy cows, sometimes we will get a response if we add some limiting amino acids. So anyway, these kind of list of the essential amino acids for pigs. Lysine tends to be the most limiting amino acid in a pig's diet because we feed corn to pigs, and corn is relatively lower in lysine than some other feedstuffs. Methionine is the essential amino acid that contains sulfur, as well as cysteine and cysteine. So there's just the 3 amino acids here that contain sulfur. Some textbooks will say there's just 2 amino acids that contain sulfur, methionine, and then the cysteine, because cysteine and cysteine are essentially almost the same amino acids. Now, poultry, they need 3 additional amino acids here, and taurine is required by cats. And taurine, you do not find that in plant products, so a vegetarian cat is not going to be very healthy unless taurine is made synthetically and added to that cat's diet. I'm not sure why this cat is so angry. That fish there should be a good balanced diet for the cat, unless the cat just wants more. You can see here that the structure of the amino acids are relatively simple compounds, generally 4 to 6 carbon chains in length, small enough they can be easily absorbed through the small intestine and into the bloodstream. What do you call an acid with an attitude? It's amino acid. So hopefully we know more about amino acids now than we did prior to watching this video. And this slide concludes the video on Nutrition 3 proteins.